You finally sat down. Nothing urgent left to do. And within about 90 seconds, your brain started listing things you should be doing instead. That's strange, isn't it? You waited all week for this moment. And now that it's here, some part of you feels like you're getting away with something. Here's the reframe. What you're calling laziness is not laziness at all. It's your nervous system misreading stillness as risk. Your brain didn't evolve to recognize rest as safe. It evolved to recognize movement, effort, and output as evidence that you're handling threats. So when you stop, your brain doesn't relax with you. It starts scanning for what you're supposedly failing to handle. Robert Sapolsky, a neuroendocrinologist who spent decades studying stress physiology, found something important about this. Your stress response system doesn't just react to real danger. It reacts to any signal that resembles danger, including the absence of visible effort. In modern life, doing nothing can register as a subtle alarm. Not because rest is actually risky, but because your body has learned to associate constant motion with safety. Think about how you were rewarded growing up. Praise for finishing things. Praise for staying busy. Praise for being productive, responsible, ahead of schedule. B.F. Skinner, who studied how behavior gets reinforced through reward and consequence, would call this a conditioned loop. You weren't just taught to work. You were taught that your worth shows up in your output. And once that loop is reinforced enough times, rest doesn't feel neutral anymore. It feels like falling behind. So the guilt isn't really about the couch. It's about what the couch seems to represent. Now, picture a normal Saturday. You have 3 hours with nothing scheduled. What happens? For most people, the hands reach for the phone before the mind even decides to relax. You check messages. You scroll. You open an app that shows you exactly what everyone else did with their weekend. Someone finished a workout. Someone launched a project. Someone's kitchen is spotless in the photo. And suddenly, your unstructured hour feels like evidence against you. This is where modern technology quietly changes the equation. Your phone doesn't just interrupt rest. It turns rest into a comparison exercise. Every scroll becomes a tiny audit of how still you are next to how busy everyone else appears to be. And appearances are the key word here, because you're comparing your actual, ordinary Saturday to everyone else's curated highlight reel. Vacations reveal the same pattern, just in a more visible way. You plan the trip, you clear the calendar, and then a few days in, restlessness sets in anyway. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, a psychologist known for studying what he called flow, the fully absorbed state you enter during challenging, engaging activities, found that people often report feeling more satisfied during structured, effortful tasks than during idle downtime, even when they say they want the downtime more. That's part of why lying on a beach can feel oddly unsatisfying compared to a demanding hike, even though the beach is what you said you wanted all year. Rest without any structure or challenge doesn't give your brain the same clear signal of accomplishment that effortful activity does. So it can start to feel aimless, even when it's exactly what your body needed. Andrew Huberman, who studies the nervous system and how it regulates stress and attention, has pointed out that your baseline state of alertness is shaped by repeated signals, not single events. If your days are filled with notifications, deadlines, and constant low-grade urgency, your nervous system calibrates to that pace. Then when the urgency disappears, your body doesn't know what to do with the quiet. It can feel less like relief and more like an itch you can't quite reach. Here's the counterintuitive part. Rest isn't the natural default your body slides into once work stops. It's actually a skill, one that has to be practiced, almost like a muscle that atrophies from disuse. If your nervous system has spent years being rewarded for staying activated, then stillness will initially feel uncomfortable, even wrong, even when nothing is actually wrong. That discomfort is not proof you're doing something bad. It's proof you're doing something unfamiliar. This is not a diagnosis, it's not laziness, and it's not a character flaw. For many people, it's simply an old survival pattern operating in an environment where it no longer applies. Think about the Sunday evening feeling, that low hum of dread before the week even starts. Some psychologists refer to this as anticipatory stress, your brain rehearsing tomorrow's demands before they've arrived. Notice how it rarely shows up on Sunday morning when you still technically have a full day of freedom left. It shows up later, once the unstructured hours start running out and your mind quietly shifts back into preparation mode. That shift isn't really about the calendar. It's about your brain sensing that the safety of handling things is about to be required again, and rest starts to feel like borrowed time. Or think about the guilt that shows up specifically when you're resting well. Not tired, not sick, not recovering from something. Just choosing to do nothing on a random afternoon. That version of rest often feels the most uncomfortable because there's no obvious justification attached to it. You didn't earn it through exhaustion, you just took it. And for a nervous system trained to associate rest with permission rather than need, unearned rest can feel like it's breaking a rule nobody actually wrote down. There's a quieter version of this pattern too, the kind where you fill your rest with almost productive activities instead of actual stillness. Organizing your closet on a day off, answering emails real quick before you sit down, cleaning while telling yourself you're relaxing. These aren't accidents. They're compromises your brain negotiates so you can feel like you're resting without fully sitting in the discomfort of doing nothing. Workplaces reinforce this loop without even trying. Cal Newport, who studies attention and focus in modern work culture, has described how visible busyness has become a stand-in for actual value in many jobs. Answering messages quickly, staying online late, filling your calendar back to back, none of that necessarily means meaningful work is happening, but it looks like commitment. And when busyness becomes the visible proof of being valuable, rest starts to look like the opposite of value, even when it's the thing that lets you think clearly and do better work afterward. None of this means you need to force yourself to sit motionless until the guilt disappears. That's not the goal, and pushing through discomfort rarely works the way people expect. The goal is simply to notice the pattern when it shows up, to recognize that the tightness you feel while resting isn't a warning about you. It's an old alarm going off in a body that hasn't fully updated to your current life. The next time you sit down and that flicker of guilt shows up within the first few minutes, try noticing it without immediately acting on it. Not analyzing it, not arguing with it, just naming it quietly. Something like, "This is the old pattern, not an emergency." That small act of noticing creates a tiny gap between the feeling and your response to it. And that gap is often where change actually starts, not through forcing rest, but through recognizing that the discomfort of stillness is a signal worth understanding rather than obeying. So the next time you finally sit down and your brain starts listing everything you should be doing instead, remember what that moment actually is. It's not proof that you're falling behind. It's just a nervous system still learning that stillness is not the same thing as danger.